Okay, we're going to start out tonight. I'm going to tell you a story about a turtle and a jackal. And this is from the Kuma Sutta, which is in the Samyutta Nikaya. And what the story is, there was this turtle came up to the side of this lake, and he was going to forage for some food. And this jackal came up and was foraging for some food over here. And the jackal saw the turtle saw the jackal, and the turtle decided the best thing he should do is pull in his arms, his legs, his tail, his neck into his hard shell. And that's what he did. The jackal came over and looked at it and said, okay, I'll just wait here a minute because eventually this turtle's going to let one of the legs out or his head out, and I'll grab it and I'll have something to eat. So he waited and waited and waited, and finally the jackal got tired of waiting around, and he went away and didn't bother the turtle. And then the sutta goes on to say, in the same way, monks, Mara. Now, Mara is what they call the personification of the defilements, greed, hatred, and delusion. Mara is constantly, ceaselessly hovering about you thinking, perhaps I'll get an opportunity by means of the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body. Perhaps I'll get an opportunity by means of the intellect. Thus, monks, you should dwell with the doors to your senses well guarded. On seeing a form with the eye, do not grasp at any theme or detail by which, if you were to dwell without constraint over the faculty of the eye, evil, unskillful qualities such as greed or distress might assail you. So tonight, the talk is about six senses and knowing. And I'll tell you what knowing means later. But unlike the turtle, we can't shut down our six senses. And so we're going to be talking about the six senses tonight, and I'm going to talk about what they are. A lot of people know what it is. It's one of the basic teachings of the Buddha. It is also we're going to see why it's important, and then I've been working with this over the past few months, and I want to see how I've been looking at it from a different perspective. I've been read some things and looking at it a little bit differently, and really to see how it's going to develop our capacity to know. So let's look at what are they. In the Buddhist teachings, we normally take there's five senses, but in the Buddhist teachings there's six senses. And and they look at it like there's the way he describes it, there's the internal sense organ, and then there's the external sense object. And I'll go through each one of these. There's the eye, there's a visible form, and there's seeing results. There's the ear, the sound, hearing. There's the nose, odors, smelling occurs. There's the tongue, there's flavors, tasting occurs. There's the body, there are tactile sensations, and that we have body sensations occur. And then there's the mind, which is the sixth sense in this the teachings. There are mind objects, and these can be thoughts, reasoning, memory, reflection, moods, emotions, and thinking occurs. So we have the sixth sense. We have and even though they're listed in the external, but they're really internal for the mind. But what really happens here then is we have this body which has the six senses, but you have four things kind of have to happen around it. There has to be the sense organ. Let's use hearing. There has to be the ear. There has to be a sound. That's the external sense object. There has to be contact. In other words, there has to be contact between the two. And there has to be a moment of consciousness. And that's what sometimes they'll say. That's the seeing consciousness. Because it has to happen. You have to know it. I mean, I don't know how many of you, someone's been talking to you or heard someone talking and they'll come in and, did you hear what I say? No, I didn't hear it. Yeah. You know this, they heard you talking, but they didn't hear you. I've read a book, I'll read a page, and I'll get to the end of it and go, I don't have any idea what I just read. Even though there was contact, there was an eye and a sight, there was an object, and I saw it, I had no idea. So that moment of consciousness wasn't there. And I think we've all had that experience. So all four of those have to be there for this experience to take place. This experience to take place. So that's the basic things of what the six senses are. Why are they important? And I've given this talk before, and they've had all these other things why it's important, but I want to focus on just a couple things this time. The six senses describe a comprehensive field that includes all of our ordinary experiences. The Buddha taught, this is how we experience life, or through these six senses. He described a couple other things like the hindrances and maybe like the aggregates. But this body, this is how we experience our world. There's a discourse he gave on totality, and he says that this is everything. Everything, our experience are these six senses. If anybody says there's anything else, they're wrong. This is our total way of experiencing life. So that's pretty important. The second reason is that since this is how we experience the world, this is where suffering takes place. Guy Armstrong, in his book, he says, the discourse reveals a fundamental perspective that underlines the Buddha's teaching. The domain of these teachings is the immediate experience of a human being. Why? Because it is the field of one's direct experience that suffering is born, and it is in the field of one's direct experience that suffering is ended. This was what the Buddha's sole interest. Both formally and now, I teach only suffering and the cessation of suffering. So in other words, if this is where we're experiencing life, this is where we experience our suffering, this is where we can end it also. So that makes it very important. And then the third important, what I think is the third important, is that is moment to moment. If we're in the world, we're experiencing it moment to moment. We have a chance to work with this, every time we can get to know, we can learn to know what's going on in the world through our six senses. Because we're like the turtle, we can't block it out. We're going to be involved with the world. So every moment we have a chance to learn, to sharpen our ability to know. And that's what I've been using this for. So that's why it's important. So the way we work with this, the first way we want to do is, the teachings say, is to look at the process instead of the content. This idea of seeing is just seeing. Hearing is just hearing. Thinking is just thinking. It's just a process. I'm not thinking about what I just saw. That's the object out there. It's the idea of just thinking. It's just a process. Thinking is just a process. Seeing is just a process. It's just nature. It's just nature. So this idea, and I'll get a little bit more about this knowing, this idea of it's just thinking. Sometimes I'll be walking in the woods and I'll go, it's just seeing, it's just bodily sensations, it's just hearing. And that's what I've been working with. It's just nature, and it is just our reality. It's our only reality. It's just this process. This is a different way of looking at it for me. I was reading some more. Been reading some Sayadaw Tejaniya stuff. And he says, the world is a creation of our mind. Everything we experience happens in the mind. So there is no need to look outside. Everything is happening right here in our own minds. This was hard to do too. But if we think about it, my knee is hurting. What knows the knee is hurting? Does the knee know it? The mind knows it. A sound happens. Where do we know that sound? In our mind. A thought happens. Where do we know that thought? In our mind. If I see something, where do I know I've seen something? Do you know you're sitting right now? That's a bodily sensation. Do you know you're sitting? Do you know that you're hearing right now? That knowing that process, knowing that you're hearing right now in this moment. I was reading another book, there's about three, but this is from Long Pu Dan. He paraphrased the Buddha's Four Noble Truths like this. The mind sent out is the cause of suffering. The result of the mind being sent out is suffering. The mind that sees the mind with crystal clarity is the noble path. The result of the mind that sees the mind with crystal clarity is liberation. And I had to think about this for a little bit. The mind sent out, and that's what Tejaniya was talking about. It goes out. If the mind goes out. So we want to look, where is our mind right now? Where is it? Is it out there or is it here? Are we paying attention? What is going on right now? And going out is how we interact with the world. That's how we, through our senses, we interact through taste, touch. This is how we interact with the world. But we have to, if the mind is not guarded, like the turtle, it's not guarded, then suffering occurs. The past is gone, the future is yet to come. Both are concepts. They are not real. This moment is your reality. Your work is to be gently aware of what is perceived at all of your sense doors in this moment. That's all. What's going on with your sense doors? And sometimes I'll go through and go like, what am I tasting now? What am I smelling? And smelling was interesting because we always think smelling is probably occurring right now as we breathe in some way. Do we know that's happening? Do I know I'm sitting? Do I know I'm seeing? Do I know I'm hearing right now? That's a process. That's hearing. The book, and then I read some more about, this is from Longpur Pramoto. He says that know the body is sitting, standing, walking, and lying down when it is. If the mind is happy, unhappy, or neutral, recognize that it's so. If the mind is craving or not craving, know that this is so. If the mind is angry or not, deluded or not, restless or dispirited, know it is so. He goes on to say, just know what is going on in the body and mind as much as possible. Genuine mindfulness will arise on its own. When mindfulness arises, we keep watching with a mind that is impartial toward what occurs. Such a neutral mind is not eager to know what arises. It lets phenomena occur naturally and knows just after the fact what is taken, what has arisen. And when it knows, it doesn't slide down into each phenomena to have a look at it. It's not going out to all those sounds. It's not going out to all those things. It knows from a distance. It's like the mind is standing on a riverbank and watching things pass downstream. It doesn't jump into the river. After we know what has arisen, we don't go in to interfere in any way. And that was another concept. We're interfering with what's going on. If a beautiful lady or a handsome man walks by, we don't try to avoid seeing him or her. If the eyes have already seen, then we acknowledge that seeing has occurred. After the eyes have seen and the mind lust arises, then we recognize this is so. Don't interfere with this process. Just practice knowing. If craving or anger arise and we look for a solution to get rid of it, we are not knowing with a neutral mind. We are knowing and interfering. He says, just know. Tejaniya says, as you're seeing, you can understand that it is the pure nature of this phenomena. That in this pure nature of this, in just the seeing, just the hearing, just the thinking, craving, inversion, and delusion are absent. In just that process, craving, the three defilements are absent. Just the thing, if just the process, the defilements are there. They are not innate qualities of the mind, but visitors that obscure the mind's ability to see reality clearly, to see the way things are. And then we can develop the skills to let them go. So this idea of knowing is important. We use the six senses to practice how to know, to learn that. Do I know this is happening? And as we develop this ability to know, it allows wisdom to arise. And that's where we get into things. Wisdom can arise and start to see this is what's happening. Because when the mind goes out there, when my mind goes out there to catch a hold of something, what's it going to do? It's going to try to cling to something, try to crave. It's going to push something away. And it's out there doing this. And I need to know that's happening, first of all. Wisdom can come in and go, you're clinging, suffering is occurring. But what I do, I learn to let go. But we go back to this beginning point of knowing what's happening in this moment of our reality. To close out, Andrew Lewinsky says this. He says, way down under all these layers of mind is a simple moment of contact, the simultaneous coming together of a sense organ, a sense object, and a moment of consciousness that cognizes one by means of the other. Their basic awareness is merely an episode of knowing, carrying no content or quality of its own. Awareness, which we can say knowing, mindfulness, awareness can all be the same thing. Awareness itself, if we can reach it under all the world it's been, is tranquil, luminous, and unadorned. So these were some different ways I've been working with this, some different perspectives on this that were different. We call it knowing, we call it mindfulness. So I offer that up for your consideration to kind of look at that from a different perspective. Thank you.